This week I wanted to talk about bulk mulch and how to buy it, how to estimate, how much you need, how to lay it out. It's a lot easier than buying it by the bag. Sometimes, just being able to shovel it and not having to throw the plastic away and all that. So again, just kind of go through that and show you how to do it for your house. So the first step is to estimate. So you may not have exactly square areas. Like in mine, I have a lot of angled. And so the first thing I do is kind of go a little bit at a time. So for example, I got this area that's angled. The largest side is 21 feet. And then I go and I measure the longer side. And then I go to the shorter side and get that. What I'm trying to do is find out the max and the minimum and kind of find an average. So what I do is essentially get an average measurement for that diagonal. And then I kind of estimate that it's a rectangle. So you can see I went 9 on one side, 12 on the, 4 and 9. And I kind of just estimated it should be about 8 or 9, and I found kind of the middle area, it was 9, so I went ahead with that. So I just said, on average, it would be about 9 feet wide, and then I get the length. And so again, I'm trying to find a rectangle. So here it's about 21. I kind of go over a little bit just to kind of go over, so I have extra to make sure I'm not, underestimating. So again, I have a 21 by 9 rectangle for this area to estimate. So. And then I wanted about 3 inches. That's usually the average. So I'm trying to get all the measurements in feet. So 3 inches is about 1/4 foot, or 0.25. So to estimate how much I need there, I do 21 times 9 times 1/4, and I get 47 1/4. And that's square feet, but we need to order by yards. So divide by 27, which is 3 times 3 times 3, but just divide by 27. And so for this area, I need 1 3/4, or 1.75 cubic yards. So when you order it, you just say, this is how many yards I want. And depending on how much you get, the size of the truck that's going to come dump it there is, going to come. So I like to put plastic down, especially when I'm putting colored mulch. So you can see it dumps it. When you clean up, it makes it a lot easier. And when you're trying to scoop it, you can use that plastic, kind of like get the little bits. And this is what it looks like dumped. So I got 6 yards, which would be, if they did it exactly perfect, would be 1 by 2 by 3. And some of the tools you want, you're going to want obviously a buck or a wheelbarrow. You want something kind of big, so you're not having to hand carry it. A pitchfork, that's the easiest, just to scoop it. And then a rake. You can use a plastic one like this, or the metal ones are good. And then some gloves as well, especially if you're using the colored mulch. And what you want to do is go around and edge the area between the grass and the mulch if you have grass. And part of it I've done already here. It grew in a little bit just because I did it a couple days before. What you want is, again, a straight edge there. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then a little trough. So you should be able to see here as I go to the side, there's a little trough. And what that does is it holds the mulch down in there. So anything on an angle, because if you have a raised bed, so it doesn't all slide down there. So the easiest is with a straight shovel like this, and just kind of just edge it a little bit. Depending on how long it's been, you might be a little bit more extra work, but again, you just want to edge it and get a little bit of a little gully in between the grass and the bed, or whatever you're doing. So you can see here I've done as I mentioned, it was a couple days ago that I did this, and so the grass grew in a little bit, or it's a little bit long, but you see there's a little gully. Even where I have ground cover like this, I like to have a little gully there just to separate, so that the grass, have a way of separating the grass from the garden area. Then you want to go into the existing and get all the weeds out, anything that's there. I still had to do a little bit more here, but you want to kind of, again, clear all that out, so that you want to do all this prep work before you actually get the mulch, so that you're ready to go. Anywhere you have like loose rocks, where I have some here, I like to put some plywood down. But again, I kind of like to do this beforehand. And then clear out junk. He's always got toys, I don't know, pots, again, more toys, some soil, potting mix, things like that. But again, do all this beforehand, so especially before it gets dumped and blocks your driveway, or it rains and it just makes a mess. It's easy to just have it ready to go, so that all you're doing is shoveling out. And depending on how hot it is, a good bottle of water, a couple bottles, especially since you're going to be out there for a couple hours, depending on how long you have to be. As I mentioned, this is colored mulch, so just kind of showing you on this paper. It has a dye in it, obviously. So that's why you want to have gloves and cover your driveway, cover anything, because especially when it rains, you might get a little bit. So I like to have some old gloves, just ones that I'm probably not going to use again. You can see these ones have some holes in the finger, and you'll see that come back later. But again, I wouldn't use some brand new gloves because they're going to get be messed up. So what I like to do is just dump it where I'm going to use it. And I usually bring a couple barrels or wheelbarrows full, not just one at a time. Go back and forth. It kind of saves time. So I'm gonna, and I also don't like walking on it and kind of patting it down, especially if you went over it a couple times. So here I'm dumping a second pile, and again I just kind of you'll get the handle of it, just how much you need for the certain area, not all into one area, and that way you can just push it loosely out. You don't want to push it up too high against your house. I actually had enough from last year of the mulch, so I don't need to do it really thick. But you can see I kind of push it into the trees, under the trees. Some areas a little bit hard to get on. Or if you have a low cover, you can kind of just pick it up with two hands and toss the piles underneath there, and just kind of work it in. So you can see this is why it helped to have a couple wheelbarrows or piles there just ready, and I can kind of work my way back without having to do it after each barrel, throw the rake down. So I'm using the metal rake. I found that's a little bit easier. And then you can see how it's laid in here into that where I had that trough between the bed and the grass. So that just looks like a smooth area. And what that does is, again, it builds it up. So when you get heavy rain, it doesn't wash down everything that you put into there and wash it all towards the grass. It has an area that can get washed down there a little bit, but as it settles, you'll get a nice even area there, and you won't, again, get any washout. So just kind of work your way around the house. You might have areas where it's raised up like this, where I can't just dump it, so it's just high enough where I can kind of push it in there, so you don't have to scoop it. Because the least amount of work you can do is the best. You're not having to, because you're already having to lift it in here. You want to minimize all the lifting you're having to do. So I kind of worked it in here, or enough that I need, but not all in one pile where I then have to move it, but just enough where I can just come back with the rake. Work it in underneath the bushes, up against the edge. You can see there's some areas just fill in, some it's heavy. I just want to throw it in there. But here's an area where it's just too high to dump it, so I had to lift it. This area actually has a French drain, where you can see kind of the drain and the rocks there, so I didn't want to fill in everything. So I'm just trying to scoop it in the back underneath the cover where there's some raw soil where the weeds can grow. So just kind of working it in under the trees. If there's, if it's shade, if it's dense, you're probably not going to need it. But any of these areas that have soil that are going to get sun, weeds will find their way into it. So I just try to cover up as much as possible. And you're just going to have to kind of figure it out. So some of these bushes might be a little bit not as dense, so you fill it in there. You might have walls. Again, you can see there's different areas that I estimated. Some of these rectangles were easy to do because it's just, again, it's just, you can get two measurements. Other was rounded areas, so you're just kind of trying to find the area. I had some drains there, so I can't fill in a drain. But again, you can see I have a lot of angled areas. So what I did was just go around, add up all these. And you can see here's the what your hand would look like, and here's that one hole that was in my glove, and you can see my thumb or my middle finger was completely black. So if you didn't have gloves on, it would all look like this. And here's just a time lapse showing of my security camera, where you can see it took me about 4 hours to do it, but you can see why it helps to have that plastic. So if you see, I was slowly, as I got on the edges, I would lift it up and kind of push it into a pile, so I didn't have to constantly be leaning over, scooping it, and then as you're done, it just makes it a lot easier just to move it around, but also on the cleanup. And it's a lot of work.